Dynamics have the reputation of being finicky, difficult to work with, and you should only use them for special occasions or high-end effects. Well, that's not necessarily true. Case in point, I have an object here, your basic text object, a logo. As you can see, just something we quickly built in Modeler, typed in the word logo, extruded it, beveled it, gave it some slight surfacing. I want to have a collision object come in from the side and knock these letters out. So what I will be doing is applying hard effects to the logo object and having a collision object come in. Now, I don't need a completely separate piece of geometry to act as my collision object. I can just add what in effect is a null with the collision function applied to it. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to open up my FX browser. Now, if you're using Lightwave 7.5 interface layout, it'll have a button that says FX browser. It brings up this very handy little menu. It has several really handy buttons inside it. One is the Add button, which allows me to add a collision object. Also has a Start button, which basically forms the Calculate button that we saw in the Objects panel. Also has a Properties panel, so we can open up and change our settings. But right now we've added a collision object. Once we have an object in layout, believe it or not, it becomes a layout item. And once it's a layout item, we can keyframe it and put it where we want. We can resize it, move it around, rotate it. Right now I'm going to move it to the side, go up to frame 30, and I'm going to move it forward so it comes in and collides with my objects. Alright, so I have my collision object. The other thing I need to do is apply some dynamics to my object. So I'm going to open up my Objects panel, go to my Dynamics tab, and select Hard, which is for hard effects. And hit my Calculate button. Look at that. Now, was that so difficult? No, I don't think so. We're going to make some changes to it, but you know, it's already working. And this may be all that you need. You just want to have your text move off the screen in a very dynamic way. Well, use dynamics. One of the things that we see that's going on here is we have all this interpenetration of the letters. What we need to change here, there's a setting that will allow this to interact with its own letters. The way hard dynamics work is this is a single object. Even though we have like 3 sections or 4 sections of this, we have 3 different letters, 4 distinct instances of the letters that are not connected, and they're behaving in a way that actually makes them look like separate objects. I know this is one of the stumbling blocks some of my students have, thinking that even though it's not connected, it's still a single object. Well, this is kind of a step backwards in the logic. But what we want to have is we want to have these letters interacting with themselves. So we're going to go into our object properties. If I click on this, it brings up my object properties. There's a tab in here called collision. We have a lot of settings, but we're just going to concentrate on this. While you think about what's happening here, what we want to have is some self-collision. So we're going to go to the button that says self-interaction. Now there's 2 settings here. There's sphere and box. If I choose sphere, what I wind up with is basically I'm applying the collision function to each one of these objects separately. Now nothing has changed yet because I haven't recalculated. But watch what happens if I do recalculate. And this time I'm going to bring up my effects browser again and hit the Start button. Unfortunately, what has happened is even before the collision object gets here, things are out of hand because everything is moved out of the way because these big collision spheres are overlapping before things even get started. So I've got my logo object selected. This time I'm going to click on this property button instead of the object properties, and it brings up the same set of options except not in the object properties panel. And I can access them either place. Sometimes this is handy. This one's a little bit smaller. So here I have, there's two ways I can fix it. One is I can select Start by Collision. Now that means if I hit Start, things will not start moving until the collision object actually hits one. Then things start jumping out of the way. It kind of works, not exactly what we want. We got a lot of jumping going on. Let's turn that off. Let's switch this to box. Now in this situation, once again, we're in a situation where each case is going to be slightly different. There's no overlapping of the bodies, and there's no, even though it's not drawing lines, it was nice before because the sphere, it actually drew a sphere. Here you kind of have to imagine it just by the points that are surrounding. This is the box that is surrounding the collision box. And if we calculate this, this is getting much closer to what we want. Our collision object comes in, it knocks the L, which knocks the O, which knocks the G, which knocks the last O. And you can almost hear the sound of pool balls hitting each other when it all goes together. Now you'll need to load up the scene and run a calculation yourself to see this actually happening in close to real time. So I have my scene set up, got the action that I want. I think I'm going to modify the path of my collision object. So it's just another light wave object. It's just another scene object. So I'm going to move it behind and have it come bursting through the front. Now notice my original motion, the displacement from the dynamics, is still in there even though I've moved my collision object. So I need to recalculate, and there it goes. And it is a pretty dynamic way of moving some text off the screen. Very, very theatrical. Let's set this to a little bit longer, and let us also increase the size of the collision object so we make sure everything gets knocked out of the way. Let's hit start. Boom! Look at that. That's pretty exciting.